One of the main battlefields of the 2022 midterm elections is state executive mansions. Governorships are incredibly important right now, and states have been laboratories of innovation for Republicans since time out of mind. So just how far is the red wave going to extend with the nation's governors? Let's find out on today's episode. I'm Dr. Nolte, and this is Blind Politics. And welcome once again, podcast listeners, into our studio here at American One in sunny but slightly chilly Hampton, Virginia. I'm Dr. A.J. Nolte, Assistant Professor of Government at Regent University's Robertson School of Government, and this is Blind Politics. Once again, views expressed in this podcast do not represent those of either Regent University or the Robertson School. Please remember you can rate and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast provider, but we would also appreciate it if you would subscribe, follow, and watch us on American One. That's American, the number one, your one-stop shop for conservative media content on politics, culture, and everything in between. So we're continuing our series of October race updates, and today we're going to look at gubernatorial rankings. Once again, October is the season of no toss-ups because it is that close, and so everything is either lean Democrat or lean Republican. I am making my race calls as of right now. But I will tell you, there are a couple of these that are still in the lean Democrat category that I can't justify moving to leans Republican, but I'm expecting upsets, right? And there has been a lot of movement. If you listen to our Senate rankings episode, you'll notice that there was some movement, but it wasn't huge because I was not taken in by the Democratic so-called mini wave or reverse wave or whatever we're calling that thing that happened in August that actually was not happening. But I will tell you, in some of these gubernatorial races, they are breaking, and they're breaking hard, and they're breaking hard for Republicans in ways that are a little bit surprising. So let's get started. I want to discuss a couple of safe races just because two of them are flips. Maryland and Massachusetts are both going to flip to the Democrats. Larry Hogan and Charlie Baker both retired, and Republicans are going to lose those seats. That is pretty much expected. I also want to say that there are sort of 5 races that were on the likely category last time, likely Republican, that are now safe Republican, and that is Georgia, Alaska, Texas, Ohio, and New Hampshire. Those races are off the playing field for Democrats as far as I can tell. I don't think there's really any chance that the Democrats are going to win any of those races. The one that could be a little bit weird is Alaska, just because of their ranked choice voting system. As we saw in the end of August, that cost the Republicans a House seat there. That's not going to happen this time. I think Mike Dunleavy is going to clear 50% in the first round. And for those who don't know the intricacies of the thrilling ranked choice voting system, if you clear 50% in the first round, you do not go to a runoff. So I'm expecting all 5 of those seats to stay with the Republicans. I don't see any upsets there. And those 2 flips, Maryland and Massachusetts, are safe Democrat. Other than that, we're not going to talk about safe seats on either side. So we're going to go, again, likely to likely, starting at likely Democrat. Once again, Connecticut is popping onto the board for us as a likely seat. Ned Lamont has a slight a lead that is significant enough that he should be expected to win. However, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that Bob Stefanowski, his Republican challenger, will be able to catch up. The lead is, again, I think right around 10 points to within 10 points. And in this type of environment, with Connecticut being a state that's going to be affected by a lot of this economic stuff, and that would be, I would say, susceptible to a Republican economic messaging, it's just on the edge of the playing field. Same thing goes for Minnesota. Tim Walz has a durable lead. It's not huge. It's not overwhelming, but it is consistent. Scott Jensen is the Republican nominee. I expect him to get the Republican floor in Minnesota, which is somewhere between, I would say, 41 to 45%, probably not much above that. Colorado, unlike the Senate race, it looks like Jared Polis is going to probably be favored here. Heidi Gannell's not necessarily running a bad campaign, but Polis is just a stronger incumbent than Michael Bennet. Bennett's been a little bit of an underperformer. And Polis, while he is a social liberal, did kind of zig when all other Democrats were zagging on COVID, playing into that more libertarian streak that people have out there in Colorado. He was a lot less restrictionist on COVID, and that's going to buy him some goodwill, I think, from independents that will translate even to today. I expect Polis to survive. I expect him to win somewhat comfortably. And I expect him to be someone who gets a little bit of buzz because of that for potential candidacy in 2024. We're not going to do a 2024 presidential power rankings until after the midterms, because while I might be a political junkie, I am not that much of a masochist. But we will have to start doing Democratic presidential power rankings after the midterms. More on that after the midterms. Let's move on to Lean D, and this race has really popped onto the radar here. And frankly, this should be a little bit closer to Lean's Republican on my rankings. I just can't justify it because of how blue the state is. But New York, you're officially on my radar. We've seen polling that has had Lee Zeldin within single digits of Kathy Hochul. But most of that polling was from Trafalgar or other Republican-leaning firms, so people were discounting it. But I'm recording this after a bombshell poll from Quinnipiac, which traditionally has a slight Democratic House effect. And Q has Lee Zeldin trailing Hochul by 4 points, 50 to 46. If that is remotely close, and if this race breaks and continues to break the way it has been breaking, Lee Zeldin's going to win this thing. Right now, I can only justify Lean's Republican. This is a blue state. Okay, Republican hasn't won a gubernatorial election in New York since 2002. And Hochul should have some support from the Democratic machine, right? But she's untested. She's never won in her own right statewide. Her last election was in 2012. She lost in her state in upstate New York. She's not going to get a hometown girl bounce from Western New York. I can tell you that right now. I have family live up there. She has alienated a lot of people. And her comments that if you're a Republican, get out of the state, that's not playing well in Livingston County and, Ontario County and Erie County and, all the various different Western New York places that she used to represent where there's a lot of Republicans. Okay. So that's seen as a betrayal. I think if you actually ask me to say, what race are we most likely to see a shocking upset? It's New York, because candidate quality matters. Zeldin has run an excellent race. Zeldin has also had that political fortune with the crime issue coming home. I mean, it's terrible for him and his family, the way he was almost attacked, the way there was a crime that was committed right outside of his door that got pressed. But it's impossible to then say the crime issue hasn't had an impact on this race. Fortune just sort of throws a ball sometimes right down the plate for you. And Zeldin has, to his credit, I would say hit it pretty well. And Hochul's just not very good. So New York is Lean's Democrat, but I'm calling that as a sneaky upset. I just can't actually rate it as Lean's Republican based on the fundamentals. And I can't, if it's choice between my gut and the fundamentals, I got to go with the fundamentals for at least for right now. Pennsylvania is next on our list. Shapiro has had a consistent lead over Mastriano. Mastriano has only recently gotten on the air with advertising. This one could actually be moving the opposite direction, more toward likely, but here's the thing. Pennsylvania is still a swing state. Gas in Pennsylvania is hella expensive. Shout out to my people from Pennsylvania, my friends from Pennsylvania who are listening to this. You know what I'm talking about. When people are driving across state lines to get gas in Maryland because gas in Maryland is cheaper, that is not a good sign. That's just generally not a good sign for you, Pennsylvania, when anything is cheaper in Maryland. There's an opening. There's a possibility. This one could be a shocker, but I'm not expecting. I'm expecting Shapiro to win, even while I'm expecting Oz to win for Senate, unfortunately. Michigan was a race that a lot of Republicans wrote off, but it's still pretty close. Tudor Dixon, I think, has been down by about 6 points, and it's a very swingish state, maybe a very, very pale shade of blue. Whitmer probably should still be favored here, but not by nearly as much. New Mexico, kind of the same. Mark Ronchetti is closing well. Michelle Leon Grisham is still slightly favored. New Mexico is a little bit difficult to poll. And if I'm remembering 2010 correctly, Susana Martinez was trailing in that gubernatorial election until very, very late in polling. And so Ronchetti could close well. He's run a pretty good campaign. Slight favored for the Democrat, but you could very easily see that one going the other way. That is the end of our Lean's Democrat races. Everything from here on is Lean's Republican. And that should tell you something, because the first race on our Lean's Republican radar is Oregon. No toss-ups, so you got to call the ball. And here's what I'm seeing. Christine Drazan is leading in every poll. Not by much, but by a little bit. Tina Kotek is way to the left. Betsy Johnson is still hanging around. She's still pulling people. But some of her backers have switched to Drazen. I think Phil Knight actually has given some money to the Drazen campaign and Drazen Alliance super PACs. So I'm thinking that Republicans are going to win in Oregon. This would be the first time that a Republican has won for governor in Oregon in over 40 years. And so this is a shocker, but Oregon is leans Republican at this point. I believe that Christine Drazen is going to win this race. And actually, if you look at Predict It, which is another measurement that I'm using, shout out to Predict It and to betting markets in general, because they're a useful check against the polls. Predict It now has things about even with a very slight advantage to Drazen. And that is a shift over the past month. All right. Next on our leans Republican is Wisconsin. Polling here has had this race within 2 points. If you're an incumbent, you're below 50%, and the polling has you only up by 1 or 2 points. That means that there are a significant number of undecideds. Undecideds historically break toward the challenger. Michel's, I think it's Michael's, has run a pretty decent campaign. And so I am expecting this race to go Republican, just because of that slight advantage that you tend to get for challengers among your undecided voters. And last poll I saw this, I think it had like 46-44, 46-45, something like that. That is not where you want to be as an incumbent governor. Next one up is Nevada. Very similar story in Nevada here to what we saw in the Senate race. Joe Lombardo is leading Steve Sisolak very slightly in polling. And I will repeat my caveat. Polling in the past in Nevada has sometimes had a Republican House effect. However, that's dependent on Hispanic Latino voters who are difficult to poll, who seem to be trending GOP, and that Republican House effect was not present in 2020. If anything, there was a slight Democratic House effect. When I say House effect, that means the polling slightly favors that party over the actual results. Predict It also has Joe Lombardo trading at like 68 cents a share. And 99 cents is as high as you can go. So Predict It is also calling Lombardo a favorite here. And so that is enough for me to bump this race into the leans Republican category. Those are all pickups. Oregon, Nevada, Wisconsin. Those are all solid races that Republicans will be, in my view, solidly favored to pick up. Likely Republican. Arizona. We weren't expecting that, were we? I think I had it at leans Democrat last month. And I was very critical of Kari Lake as a candidate because of the way she ran in the primary. And I wasn't sure she'd be able to pivot for the general election. But she has done an outstanding job just in terms of campaign quality. Okay? Whatever you may think of her stances, whatever you may think of her views, she has run a really good campaign. And Katie Hobbs, her Democratic opponent, has run a really bad campaign. Epically bad. We will study the Hobbs campaign in terms of how do you run a bad campaign? And campaign professionals will look at this campaign and be like, wow, this is an example of everything not to do. Okay? Lake is going to win, I believe, at this point. She should be considerably favored to win and to hold Arizona. That's a Republican hold since Doug Ducey is retiring. And I am bumping that race into likely Republicans. A little bit aggressive at this point, but that's the race that I'm seeing. My next and final likely Republican case is Kansas. Okay, Laura Kelly is an incumbent, but Derek Schmidt, relatively popular attorney general, very good year for Republicans, and people are banking on Kelly keeping this one competitive because of the Kansas referendum. I can tell you, having spoken, this is the abortion referendum. Having spoken to some folks from Kansas about that, I can tell you the messaging on that was very confused. Many pro-life voters were confused about what voting yes versus voting no meant, and it was ambiguously worded. So I wouldn't necessarily take that as dispositive. And also, the salience of the abortion issue has cratered. Now that people are remembering that inflation is a thing, gas prices are going up, et cetera, et cetera. I think Republicans are going to take this seat in Kansas. And it's a red state. And so I think Laura Kelly is done. You could justify a lean Republican rating here. as well, but I am going to push this one into the likely category because I think the pathway for a Democratic victory in Kansas is vanishing as the environment turns worse for Democrats overall. And that's the end of our likely Republican. Everything else that was in likely before, I have moved into the safe category. Democrats do not have a shot in Georgia. They do not have a shot in Ohio. Alaska's gone. Texas is gone. New Hampshire was never in play. So that's where we're at. Taken together, that is a net shift of R+2 in gubernatorial rankings, just based on my current ratings. So Republicans will lose 2 in Maryland and Massachusetts, but they will pick up Nevada, Oregon, Wisconsin, and Kansas. That's at R+2. But I would not be totally shocked if it's actually R+3 because I just have a gut feeling about the way things are going in New York. The other one that wouldn't shock me is New Mexico. If there's 2 that are going to be sort of upsets, those would be the 2 where I could see Republicans surprising people and overperforming my rankings. So somewhere in the range of R+2 to R+4 is what I'm looking at for gubernatorial races for 2022. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Please remember to rate and subscribe on all of your favorite places, but watch us on American One. To repeat an announcement that I made in a previous podcast, if you are looking for great coverage on election night, you are going to find that great coverage right here on American One, because I am going to be taking point on their election coverage for that night. It's going to be a Blind Politics American One election night special. We will be kicking off at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Polls will have closed in Indiana and Kentucky. We'll update you on any of those races that have popped since then. But we'll be here with my compadre, Scott McJunkin. He and I have been doing some of the backstage shows together. We're going to try to line up some really good content to keep it a lively show. And I think it's going to be the best election night coverage that you can find anywhere. Not that I'm biased. So please check us out, and we will be covering the elections that night. And we're very excited about that. So thanks again for watching and for listening. For Blind Politics, this is Dr. Nolte, signing off.